Today let us discuss 29 July 2015 newspaper. Now the first article is related to Compensatory Afforestation Fund Bill. So let's understand what is this bill is all about. Now the compensatory afforestation, it means that or it can be defined as an afforestation which is undertaken in lieu of the diversion of the forest land for the non-forest use under the Forest Conservation Act 1980. It means in the forest, whatever the land which is diverted for a developmental activity, against this diversion of the forest land, the afforestation has to be undertaken at some other place. This is what is called as compensatory afforestation. Now the compensatory afforestation fund. So this compensatory afforestation fund, it is created over the years as a compensation for diverting the forest land for the other non-forest purposes. So like setting up of industries and infrastructure, etc. So a huge money got collected which is greater than 35,000 crores and the Supreme Court has ordered for establishment of a fund management authority. So a compensatory afforestation management and planning authority, that is CAMPA, was established. But this CAMPA mostly functioned as an ad hoc authority. Now whatever the money which is collected by the states for compensatory afforestation, they are being dropped or they are being kept in this CAMPA. Now what this bill is trying to do is it creates a national fund and also a fund at the state level. So it means that a previous fund management authority which functioned as an ad hoc body is going to be made as permanent. At the national level there will be a fund, that is national CAMPA, and at the state level we have a state CAMPA. The national CAMPA consists of whatever the money till now transferred from the states and existing at the national level, and the remaining money which is still being held with the state level, that forms the part of the state CAMPA. Now it means an ad hoc management structure is replaced by a permanent management structure with regard to this particular compensatory afforestation bill. So and these funds, these are non-lapsable funds. It means that at the end of the year automatically they will not get lapsed but they continue. It means any program which has been taken under this fund, it will continue irrespective of the end of the financial year. And this fund will be under the greater parliamentary and legislative scrutiny, and this fund is under the public accounts of India now. So this is what is the bill is all about. Now what is the criticism related to the bill? Now it encourages the fragmentation of the land. Now in the name of the development, we are diverting the forest land for the industrial and infrastructure purposes. So in this context, a patches of deforestation will be created and continuity in the forest ecosystem will be disturbed. So in this context, this is what is described as fragmentation. The breaking of the forest land into blocks that are smaller and more vulnerable. So it is a serious long-term threat because of few reasons. One is it disrupts the wildlife protection, especially connectivity. So the wildlife moving across the forest, they will be confined to certain patches of the land. So their habitat is getting disturbed. It means it is going to disturb the wildlife protection in the long run. And also it creates new edges that exposes the forest for exploitation. It means a good forest land, again a patch of deforested land. So it means this encroachment or this edge is going to be more and more exposed for devastation. So in this article, there is Kudrai of Iron Ore Company Limited in Karnataka. What it did is, so in the valley region, in this Western Ghats, there is a huge amount of grassland. So whatever the iron ore which has been not useful, they are being dumped onto this grassland. And the second thing is, in the name of afforestation, various plants, homogeneous plants are being placed over there. It means the rich biodiversity is disturbed by the plants which have zero biodiversity value. So in the second thing is the afforestation and the results. If we examine the World Bank report, everything shows that afforestation is not much successful a program is. In the 12th five-year plan, almost 2,500 crores is allocated for this project. No viable output has come till date. So in this means, what is the better way than this is, the government shall spend the money on reclamation of the degraded forests rather than shifting it towards the afforestation program. It means the afforestation is more a threat to a diversity, and it becomes an incentive or a backdoor entry for in the name of the development for the deforestation. So that's what is this criticism is all about. Next is India ignored the Afghanistan, Pakistan, especially in Afghanistan, the Taliban talks have been going on under the umbrella or under the images of the Taliban, this particular ISI. Now in this context, what is the India stand? India always recommended or supportive of the peace process if it is genuine and is within the accepted red lines. Karzai government, it has described certain red lines for engagement with the Taliban. So the first condition is the talks have to be within the constitutional framework of the Afghanistan. The constitutional framework of the Afghanistan. And the second is the talks, they have to be Afghanistan centered. It means that they have to be Afghanistan owned, Afghanistan led process. Without any external intervention, these talks have to go on. And the third thing is there has to be a ceasefire agreement which has to be a precondition for these talks. Now, how these red lines are being respected by the existing Ghanese government, if you observe. So still the Taliban demands for an Islamic Emirate. It means the constitutional framework is disturbed. It is not Afghanistan owned and Afghanistan led. It is under the edges of or under the cover of ISI. There is no ceasefire agreement. So it means all the red lines are breached. So that's what is the thing. Then why is such a hurry? One thing, the outcome of these talks is the Taliban is getting legitimized as an interest of the representative of the Afghans, which is a dangerous outcome of this. Taliban as a terrorist organization is more trying to represent itself as the voice of the people of the Afghanistan. And second thing is the sovereignty of the Afghanistan, where Pakistan army and in ISI, to what extent they can ensure the independence of the Afghanistan and its talks. These are the questions that still remain. And one more threat to India is the China is actively intermediating these particular talks, because China has its own vested interest in the Afghanistan. So these are the things we need to understand. It means that Indian diplomacy or India is losing much of its stakes in the ongoing negotiations. And also India do not have a much role in these negotiations too, which it cannot expect to. Next is agrarian distress in India. Now if you compare the green revolution onwards, the fertility of the soils has degraded and vulnerability of the farmers to the crop failures has increased, especially due to the vagaries of the monsoons. Now, recently, National Crime Records Bureau, it has collected the data and tried to analyze the reasons for the suicide of the farmers. In this context, the debt crisis is the major reason which was said to be the cause for the suicides. So in this context, the family or a farmland owner greater than 1 hectare can only make a minimal money above the cost of his inputs. So in the era of increasing cost inputs, The farmers who have got the greater chunks of the land, they are coming out of the debt crisis. But however, the small and marginal farmers are still susceptible for this debt crisis. So, but people greater than 1 hectare of land are not more than 35%. The 35% of the family households, farming households, have the land greater than 1 hectare. It means that most of the farmers in India, they are vulnerable for the losses, which is leading them or pushing them into a vicious cycle of debt. And this vicious cycle of the debt is becoming a long-term reason for the agrarian distress, which is leading or taking the form of a suicide. So it means the long-term correction of the agricultural sector involves the sustainability of income and development of the alternative avenues of associated to the farming, and insurance to the crops or establishment of a strong crop insurance mechanism. All these things have to be given a serious thought now. Now the benchmark for the banks, what the thing is, the private sector banks and public sector banks are compared with regard to their performance evaluation. And public sector banks have been criticized as inefficient and poorly managed because of their rising non-performance assets. Now in this context, let us see, are really the public sector banks are inefficient? The first thing is, you have to analyze or evaluate any institution based on the objectives or goals with which it is performing. Many of the social objectives are becoming a burden on the public sector. Most of the human and other resources of the public sector banks are diverted to meet these social objectives. Example, Jan Dhan Yojana. In this context, the public sector banks have created more than 16.5 crores of the bank accounts against less than 50 lakhs of the accounts created by private sector banks. And also responsible rural banking. The public sector banks are active. Priority sector lending, there are different norms for both. So in this context, the major non-performing assets of the public sector banks is due to its increased exposure to aviation, textile, infrastructure industries. So now, infrastructure, the government has, a country has a long-term interest in this. And textiles, because of the competition growing from China and also the Bangladesh and weak external demand, these have led to the losses on these fronts. So the public sector banks, they are taking the major chunk of the credit supply in the economy. It means that their exposure for the risk is also high in the economy. That is the reason why the benchmark standards for evaluation for public sector and private sector has to be different from each other. That's what is this article argues. But from my opinion, so what we can say is, more and more in a market-led economy, the public sector banks, the government share is getting diluted. So they have to take up the norms or corporate norms for this particular activity. At the same time, financial inclusion is definitely important. But however, government has to compensate for these banks because most of the accounts opened under Jan Dhan Yojana, they increased the transaction cost of these banks. And most of the accounts are being unused till date. It means these are creating a burden on the banking sector, especially public sector banking. So the government has to use their services and has to duly compensate for the services which they are providing for. And also, as the human resources are getting diverted for the governmental priorities, the other customers, they are slowly losing for this commercial enterprise. So these sensitivities have to be taken into consideration by the government of the day. And our loving president, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, he has passed away. This editorial is about him, igniting minds. Now I have got an opportunity to meet him in Hyderabad, and just I have a very small spell of talking to him, and he is a person to be inspired. And yes, Definitely we all miss him, right? Thank you very much. And with regard to the Abdul Kalams, what are his contributions to India? Try to learn them. There is no need to talk about that. As a president of India, so what are his important decisions, especially with regard to certain ordinances, where he showed himself as a people's president, and how the highest office in the country can be used to reach to the millions of the students, that was shown by the Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, standing as an example to it. So great tributes to this great man, and thank you very much. Good night.